Hello, everybody. Welcome to Money Moves at Machine Speed, Trust, Risk, and Quality in Agentic Finance. I'm Brian Corkery. I'm the Managing Director of Banking Financial Services at 𝐓𝐫𝐢𝐧𝐜 AI, and I'm delighted to be moderating today's conversation. We're at a pretty fascinating and potentially defining moment in financial services. Right? No sector has more to gain from AI, and arguably no sector has less room for error. And for years, we've talked about AI helping us recommend the trade, flag a fraud event, suggest a next best action, or help an employee make a decision. But we're now moving from AI that recommends to AI that acts. Right? Agents can investigate a dispute, initiate a transaction, interact with a customer, make decisions across a workflow, or even write and deploy code. And in financial services, that changes the conversation dramatically. Because when an AI agent can act, make a decision on behalf of a customer institution, trust can be an afterthought. In banking and financial services, an AI mistake isn't simply a bad search result or an inconvenient customer experience. It can impact the customers financially. It can create regulatory and compliance exposure and carry significant reputational risk for the institution. The question is no longer simply, is the model accurate? It's become, what are we willing to let this agent do, and what has it done to earn that level of trust? That brings us to the heart of today's discussion: trust, risk, and quality. How do we build the right guardrails? Where do we need a human in the loop? How do we audit and explain decisions made by systems that aren't deterministic? And perhaps more importantly, how do we test and certify an agent that we can't necessarily guarantee will take exactly the same path each and every time? And we're going to look at this from three very different and very valuable perspectives. We have Trincy Thomas, a senior quality engineering leader at Gen Digital, bringing more than 20 years of experience across fintech, BFSI, and technology, and a deep perspective on data quality, compliance, security, and scaling quality engineering. Welcome, Trincy.
Thank you.
Next, we have Preetham Sunilkumar. He's the Vice President and Software Development Manager at LPL Financial, who leads initiatives spanning platform modernization, software development, quality engineering, and software delivery, with a particular focus on automation, AI-powered quality, and modern DevOps. Welcome, Preetham.
Thanks, Brian.
And we also have Krystyna, and I'm not going to try to pronounce her last name. You guys can see it on the screen here. An accomplished quality and accessibility leader with more than a decade of experience in software quality and compliance, including financial applications serving more than 1 million users. And as I understand it, she also brings a law degree, a judo brown belt, and a love of Harry Potter to the conversation, which may actually make her uniquely qualified to deal with the risks of autonomous AI.
100%. Thank you, Brian.
Welcome, Krystyna. Thank you. So, I'm looking forward to hearing all three of your terrific perspectives. So we're going to start with a simple question that I'm going to pose to everybody. We've heard a lot about AI. We've heard a lot about pilots and proof of concepts, but let's focus on what's real. Can each of you share an example where agents are truly acting in financial services today, moving a dispute or a claim forward, touching a transaction, versus where they still only recommend, right? And so for this, we want to hear from everybody, but let's start with Krystyna, and then we'll hear from Trincy and Preetham.
Sure. Like my perspective on this is really simple. Like the more real money and the more regulation involved, the more agents are still consulting, not doing really actual work. But we can still delegate some work to agents when they're not life-threatening for people and for business. Like, let's talk about claims. Like we received a claim where it was a duplicate transaction posted to a client or our participant account. And it's obvious we have a attached evidence. Our agent can analyze the contract, analyze the claim, and agent can go and look the history of transactions. And in this matter, if we have, indeed, it was like $15 posted twice to the account, it's obvious the claim and transaction is indeed truthful and we can revert transaction. But it's important to understand that for this example, there should be some, like gates set up for the level of how big amount is we're talking about. So anything AI agent can do should be reversible in the future. So, to protect our customers and the company itself.
No, I like that a lot. I'm wondering if, financial services as a whole is challenged because of how important these transactions are and how important this whole service is to the individual. Insurance in particular, because insurance is really the science of looking backwards, right?
Right.
And in insurance with AI, there's nothing to look backwards at, right? It's only forward. So I can totally understand how you're being cautious with how you do it. Next, let's hear from Trincy.
Oh, thanks. Good points there. I don't personally work directly on disputes, claims, and payment. In my area, we work with software that helps the business track digital money flows and present better offers to users and so on. So what I have seen is the agent autonomy is in a binary. It's a spectrum. So we use agents to support a person, maybe a developer. The agents gather information, analyze it, and make a recommendation for a person to review. Once we become confident that the agent is making good decisions, we can give it more responsibility. That agent can make a decision by itself eventually, but within boundaries defined by a subject matter expert or somebody who is assigned to that task. So once that process by the agent becomes reliable, the next step is letting that agent actually act on that decision and then maybe execute a process, make a change, maybe trigger another decision, and so on. So an example in our case was that maybe for code review, that's where we initially started. Agents can make review suggestions, resolve them, add commits as a resolution, maybe have a human in the loop, but it ran sanity checks. It could even block a release. So we relied more on it as we were able to trust it. So from my perspective, the interesting change isn't simply that AI is making recommendations. It's where gradually we are giving that agent more responsibilities. And while we are not literally moving money, we're using those agents to make decisions about the data related to money, maybe to execute a process related to that, and eventually that's something that affects that transaction trail. So I think the pattern is probably bigger than financial industry. The same progression is happening most likely in many industries. And what's different in the financial services is that the level of risk and controls we need around those actions, maybe they're probably more prominent. And that's what I think.
Oh, no, great. Great input. You're 100% right. This is affecting everything everywhere through all verticals. The sensitivity around financial services is just heightened, not just because of the care that the clients deserve and need, but also because of scrutiny through regulation, right? Whether it be the individual states for insurance, FINRA, SEC, the Office of the Comptroller for banks directly. And that's probably why we've seen that this vertical in general is A, risk averse, and B, a little bit of laggard of the most cutting edge technologies for just that reason. Also, we're also always waiting for regulation to catch up, right? To tell us what to do. But I love what you said. And before I turn to Preetham for his thoughts, I also kind of honed in on kind of three words that you used over and over again. One was trust, right? One was human in the loop, or that's a phrase. And then the other was eventually.
Yes.
Right. And all three are critical. And the combination of the three gets us to where we can be more autonomous, right? But Preetham, please share an example you may have seen at LPL or anywhere really.
All right. All right. Thanks, Brian. I think that's a benefit you get of going last, right? You've got most of things covered. Well, I'll change my perspective in a different way, right? So I'll tell you where the agents are truly acting today, right? Before I do that, let me challenge the framing here, right? So in wealth management, the most important thing an agent can act is not on the transaction, all right? So now let me be precise, right? So we have a lot of marketing noise, conflicting agent and automation. So the automation was existed in finance for decades. We know that. We had rule-based systems, which is routing transaction, flagging frauds since 1990s, right? So, but what is new now? Now we have the models, right? So models that can reason about contest, that can change your multiple step decisions together and take actions. So this actions is where it's gate kept by humans, right? So the shift from recommendation to acting is where the real conversation begins, right? So let me give you the honest landscape from where I sit, from the independent financial advisory world, right? Where this agent's been hacked it. So there are three layers I would just want to call it. The first one is the operational layer, right? Where the agents are fully acting. Think about the account maintenance, which is a great example, right? Your address change, your beneficiary updates, your account transfers, your document retrieval, name it, anything on the account maintenance. So this is where the agents are completely driving end to end without human in the loop, right? That's a real money. It's not a transaction. That's a real benefit you get. But let me give you something more meaningful, right? Which is the second layer. How do we enable advisors, right? This gets most exciting for us. So one of the most powerful thing AI agents are doing in wealth management is giving advisors back a most precious resource. You know what's that? It's a time. Here is a practical story, right? So an advisor walks into the client review meeting. Historically, they spend like hours of time in pulling the client's performance data, stress testing financial models, or forecasting how the 6 months looks like, or running tax estimations, so on and so forth. This pre-work is critical, right? I'm not saying no, but it's not where the advisor creates value. The value is in conversation, the relationship, the judgment call, right? So now how the AI agents is acting here. Now the AI agents can do this today, entire discussion planning autonomously. That means pulling the client's portfolio, showing them how their portfolio is doing, and forecasting their rebalancing strategies and tax implications, so on and so forth. So this all presented to the advisor to talk to the client just in minutes, right? So the agent comprehended the 10 or 20 hours of prep work into minutes. So that's the time the advisor gets back. So that's the time the advisor can use it to build their business, right? Or simply have a family time. This is not a small thing. That's how the sustainable advisor practice look like, right? And the third thing before I conclude, which is most interesting layer, is the compliance layer, right? Let me give an example again, right? Under FINRA regulations, right? If any marketing or advertising material that advisor wants to put in front of a client, this has to go through a formal compliance review. So the market names it as a MRR process, which stands for Marketing Regulator Reviewer. That means there's a human reviewer who reviews this content. Today, on an average, if you look at the industry, it takes 5 to 10 days, right? So the 5 to 10 days before an advisor can send a market commentary or a newsletter or prospecting piece to a client, the advisor needs to wait. But now the AI agents can perform the first pass review in minutes, right? It can scan the content against the FINRA rules set, and you can flag the violations, and you can go even one step ahead, right? Correcting the content, right? And giving more suggestions. And all this happens in minutes. Now, the reviewer, human, will still make the judgment call, but they make the judgment call on already previewed or reviewed content, right? So that's an agent acting in a regulated workflow, not just recommending. So to conclude, Brian, right, if you want to draw a line between acting and recommending, this is where I've seen the pattern, which is consistently running across the industry, is the agents are earning more operational trust, right, rather than earning consequential trust. It's getting into the consequential, but the operational area is where the agents are being widely used in the financial industry. With that, I conclude, and back to you, Brian.
Look, I love the answer, and I love the answer for one specific reason. Not only are we hitting on, creating more time for advisors, you weren't just creating it for the purpose of more revenue generating activities, which is generating those more deeper relationships and more relationships, but you also hinted on something else, is quality of life, right? So they're using that time for both, quality of life as well as building their business, which I love. You also hit on what we're going to get into in the next question, which is how do you do this in a rapidly evolving, moving at the speed of light environment where you also have to rely on regulation. And you started to talk about that with document review and marketing material review pieces. I can also see why LPL is one of the largest, or is the largest independent financial brokerage, which is, right, you're giving these people the tools they need to be more successful, right, in continuing their business and growing their business. So that was great. The next question, which Preetham I had allocated to you, which was, given just how fast everything's moving, especially especially with the advent of real adoption of agentic AI, how do you govern something when regulation is evolving as well, right? Because some of these things you're doing in anticipating what the regulators will do, and others you're doing with some level of clarity of what their feelings are, but not complete clarity. Can you talk a little bit more about that, especially in the example of document review prior to sending it out, right? Something used to take more than a week, which when I was, in the brokerage world, we call the cooling off period, right? That's when people decide they're not interested anymore before they even know. But now it's instantaneous. So if you could talk a little bit about that and how you work around or work with regulators, that'd be great.
All right. Thanks, Brian. I said compliance is my favorite topic, so you shooted this question towards me. All right. So the governing and regulation, right? So probably I'll give you a bit of a background, then I'll come to a specific examples you called out. See, the governing when regulation is still evolving isn't a new problem, right? It's the oldest problem in financial services. Why do I say that? So think about the derivatives, your ETFs, your high frequency trading, or even robo-advisors. So every wave of financial innovation has moved faster than the rule book, right? So when this happens, every single time the industry had to self-govern first, then they meet the regulatory off-way when the rules finally landed. So AI is no different, right? The pace is faster for sure, I admit it, and absolutely the surface area is larger, but the fundamental challenge is identical. It's still the same. So the questions for all of us, right, including our audience right here, is on the governance and regulatory. Do you wait for the regulation and fall behind, or do you build governance ahead of it and earn the regulatory trust? I'm sure which side I'm on, right? That's a critical question. But let me give you a background where the regulations stand today. The honest reality where regulation sits today is the most sophisticated AI governance framework we have in the financial services is your Federal Reserve SR 17, right? So which basically talks about the model risk management guidance, which is written in 2011. And this is designed for your stat credit models. It was never written for large language models or agentic solutions, right? But I'm not taking out that FINRA has absolutely issued guidance on AI use, and the SEC is watching the AI and investment advice very closely. I do admit that. But a specific enforceable regulation on autonomous agents in financial services, we are not there yet, right? So which means the institutions, like LPL Financials and other institutions, the building governance right now are writing the first draft of what the regulation will eventually look like, right? So having said that, now I just want to take an example of the documentation or, the example you have taken, our compliance and all of that. So here is the three approaches, I recommend, right? The first approach, as I called out, don't wait for the rule book, build internal governance now. Even for your documentation, start treating your AI agents or regulated actors, right? What does it mean is every agent action generates an audit trail. So every decision has documented logic. So when you're forecasting and documentation about how the funding is going towards and giving to an advisor, every decision has been made, there has been documented with a specific logic. And this is important. Every workflow that touches a client account has a defined human review threshold. When I say that, it's like at which point the agent stops and the human signs off, right? That's a first, right? And secondly, you need to start adopting the existing supervisory framework, right? So if you build a solution and host it in production, the first question you should start asking is, who is supervising it, right? And the answer is quite simple. It's us. It's me, you. Whoever is getting the solution out. That forces us into a very specific design. That means that every capability, the agentic capability we build and deploy, has to be something we can supervise, we can explain, and we can define to a regulatory if we need to, right? So absolutely, and the third solution, we need to solve for non-deterministic problem which is existing out there, right? So I recommend we define the boundaries of acceptable behavior, what the agent must always do, what it must never do, and how far it can drift in the middle, right? So to conclude on the regulation, this is what I say it, Brian. Don't wait for the regulation. Govern it like it's already been regulated. That's the direction. Back to you, man.
No, I love the answer, and I think that the advice of not to wait in the regulation, but yet, to meaningfully approach it and make sure you're ethically and appropriately addressing the business needs, right, puts you in a position to help even influence the regulation. And then again, we heard on your second to last point, which is, again, right, the person in the loop, right? I don't know, Krystyna, do you have anything to share from an insurance perspective?
I love the answer, absolutely, pretty, and agreed on most of it, like not most, on all of it, all of it. I'm not that close to compliance, but what do we also see, like from the testing perspective, from quality assurance perspective, we pay a lot of attention to accessibility compliance on the other hand, and that's a huge topic as well right now. And like everyone today is trying to utilize AI agents for accessibility compliance, and it's updates every year. So how do we make sure we step up, and every year we make sure we're compliant with latest regulation? And so for that, like just rescanning, rerunning our software applications daily, I would say daily, makes it really difference for us to make sure we stay compliant with the rest.
Super. Trincy, not that you're last here, but anything to add?
No, I completely agree. I mean, the main thing was, just don't wait for regulation to tell us what to do. That's changing. Sometimes even in a monthly basis, there's different models coming out, different versions within that is coming out. So basically, like how in the manual testing world, we would write test cases, submit it for a developer or a UAT or a stakeholder to review. Similarly, we would just document what we are allowing the AI to do in that moment. What are the what does it have access to, which systems it can use and all, and maybe document what it cannot do also. And for that, what prompts we were using, and maybe which model was associated to it. All the information we can, document, so that if it is necessary, we can rebuild the same thing to reproduce the same or similar result. If we can document that while going through this process, when the regulation changes, maybe we can give proper answer, in each time. So yeah, just wanted to add that, but yeah, I agree completely to both of you.
Well, we can be prepared to try to replicate the same process each time, knowing that the result's going to exist on this continuum, right? It's not going to be binary, like we said earlier.
Yeah.
We could spend the entire hour on compliance, but I want to move on and try to get as many topics as possible we can. So, Trincy, I'm going to keep you on the hot seat here and have you address this next question first. But in traditional regression testing, you assume you can rerun a test and compare the answer, right? And it's binary. But how do you test and certify a system that may not give you the same answer twice? And is point-in-time certification going away? And are we moving to continuous evaluation?
I don't think certification disappears. I think the certification criteria changes. So with the traditional deterministic systems, we can say, for this input, the expected answer is X. And of course, now with the AI system, we may not get that exact same answer every time. So instead of certifying that the system performs in a certain way or in an agreed level of quality, we need to figure out what is the right representative data set I should use in testing. We call it these days the golden data set. Once we know that kind of data set can kind of give you at least or cover the scenarios. Maybe we need to focus on, like for a non-deterministic testing, instead of saying, I don't know what the right answer is, or I cannot define that, we should try to say, this range looks good, or it's about like defining what good looks like, and then figuring out how to measure it consistently, and then setting a threshold for what we are willing to accept. So then, as I was mentioning earlier, when we change a model or when we change a criteria related to it, we can run this golden data set and then evaluate the results against a defined rubric. Things like accuracy, completeness, like whether the right decision was made, or whether the agent followed all the required rules. So early on, I would keep a human in the loop in this process as a validation mechanism. Like we can sample the AI's decisions, compare them with the human decision, track the agreement, or if a human is overriding it, track the override rates, and then eventually, build that trust. And that helps us make the rubric and the golden data set reliable, and we can continue to use that for measuring what we care about.
So adherence to process within guardrails, and then acceptable tolerances within results. Is that kind of the oversimplification?
Yeah, and what do you do to do that? You have a proper strategy and proper data, so you can use to build that, and maybe come up with a threshold too, or in the end you build what you're going to run, but you need a mechanism to say what's acceptable. So that's what I was saying. You come up with a rubric, and once that's defined, you can you can now have certification an ongoing process rather than a one-time thing.
Right. Got it. Preetham, anything to add?
No, I think Trincy is an expert there on the testing side and regression. I'll just take a pause from there. I think thanks, Trincy. I completely acknowledge what you call it.
And Krystyna, anything to add? Plus, I'm going to put you on the hot seat for the next one too.
Yeah, I would add that actually this was a basic, like, let's imagine testing 10 years ago. Testing 10 years ago and testing today, it's absolutely different worlds. And what I say, 10 years ago on quality assurance side, we never were talking about like format validation or schema validation. We were only focused on values. And right now, because of like how it's evolving and what we're checking and how we're like delegating our testing to agents, it's important that, yes, we know the values will be different, but let's also focus on properties right now. So we are more focused on schema validation. And right now, like, it's one of the requirements when we're like working with API or like generally testing software. It's became a huge thing just because how it's evolved, and that because your test result can be different every time you run something.
Certainly. I mean, testing has definitely moved from purely tactical to now more strategic. And I heard at a conference recently somebody say that, in 2024 and 2025, it was how can we leverage AI to help testing? And in 2026, it's how do we test AI, right? So it'll be interesting to see how this continues to evolve, and not to say this is the end of the road by any means. In 5 to 10 years, we'll be talking about something even more fantastic, right? So it's just constantly moving. But to keep you on the hot seat, Krystyna, and to continue moving onto other topics, something we keep hearing more and more is the human in the loop, right? And everybody agrees to a certain extent you have to keep the human in the loop. But when an AI system is right most of the time, right, we begin to build more and more trust in it and eventually stop challenging it. How do we keep human oversight meaningful rather than just a checkbox, right? And how do we continue making sure that the validation is happening appropriately, and it's not going to be something that just becomes a also ran?
Sure. Like with AI and AI agents evolving, and they became more accurate with every next version. And of course, like measuring their work is, I guess, it's more boring than it was in the beginning. And we just assume that agents are correct 99% of the time. And every time we try to check them, of course, it's like kind of obvious. And that's not because of like human being lazy, but because of us humans just being bored, and we can, we can get a burnout just because of the repetitiveness of the work. So, and how to get out of this loop and how to actually fix this. So what I think is a great model is, let's say we have two different roads. We have AI is being tested by AI. It's the first step. And we have human, also a human who is reviewing AI output is also being tested. I'll explain a little bit more here. So with my legal background, I have my own, prospect and protocol, how I see this working. So imagine you're in a courtroom and we have AI done some work, and that's the legal team representing somebody. And then we have a defense. It's another AI agent who will be checking original AI work. And that's going to be a defense who will find evidence, find inconsistencies, find problems. And so now we have original work, and we have a review of this work with an evidence and some discrepancies. And then we present this work to a judge, to a real human who can review everything, what's being present, the original work and some findings, and decide whether those findings are legit, whether they need to go through, or we're gonna assign the original version of it. So we put this human on a spot, not to review, but to judge. So we kind of get a more interactive experience. And in the first iteration, when we make AI test AI, we already find some good like evidence or errors or inconsistencies. And then we just have a final, not review, but more an interactive game, how to on where we will decide what is true, what is not. And that's more, that's more like a game rather than, like following 10 pages of AI code or script or anything. So that's the first part, how we test AI itself, humans being as judges. Another part, how do we test human who test AI? Like, it's not maybe ethical to say we test human, but there's still some
we know what you mean. We know what you mean, right?
rooms for improvements of how we are doing, because we know AI does a good job, especially if well configured with a good protocol. He can do a real good job. So what is our role here? And I would say sometimes it's very good for, let's say, like managers or somebody to specifically fabricate the false result into the output and present it to the people, to reviewers. So once, let's say, team knows that sometimes there can be a check test for me to know. So I need to watch out. I need to be more careful. It's like let's say like fire drill. We exercise them all the time just to stay cautious and remember what we are looking for, indeed what we are looking for. And because, over time, it just slips out what we are actually trying to find and how we are standing for the quality. So I think, like in the ideal world, like from my personal perspective, it's good when we have AI is being tested by AI and then being person as judge to decide whether those findings are legit or not. At least we're keeping anyone in a loop and have a little bit more interactive way of working.
So it's interesting that you use the fire drill analogy, because how many times have we been in a big office building and the fire drill goes off and no one even lifts their head, right? They just pound them away.
Exactly.
Right. So, and that's, I think, what we're going to try to make sure we don't fall into, which is everybody has this false sense of trust that the AI is doing it. And there is some irony that can't be lost here, right? Because we're relying on AI to make our lives better, to have higher quality and greater accuracy, but at the same time, somebody has to verify it. So, no, that was a great answer. Trincy, do you want to add?
Sure. So I liked it, like AI testing AI, when Krystyna said, and then human testing, and then testing human. I mean, we're talking like bots eventually.
That's the collision course we're on, right? So,
Yeah. So this was a concern when we started using AI in the beginning. It felt like things were evolving so quickly. We thought we moved on, it was reliable, trustworthy, what to do, and then later on, maybe that was not so trustworthy. So we had to go back and revise a few times in the beginning. And at the time, we kept maybe it was label driven. So if somebody liked whatever output the AI produced, they would accept it, and that had a label. If they did not accept it, it had a different label. And we could come up with a score based on that, saying what was the quality of that AI's result. And if that score was below threshold, then we add more human in the loop, and the revision process becomes more. And as soon as it reaches certain level, then you can reduce the amount of reviewer needed in the process. So I think in some level, you need a process that audits all these things and see where we need to keep reviewing AI. And then I don't think it's a done deal. It's something we have to go back and forth, since everybody is changing and everything is coming up with more, different products within the ones that we already use. So yeah,
right.
it's
like anything, that continuous feedback loop is so important, right? Preetham, how about you?
Yeah, I think probably, Brian, I'll just add and considering a mandatory activity, right, where the human should get and stuff like that, right, before even validation. So I recommend us to consider a mandatory event called as shadow mode deployment. So what does that mean is, before any agents gets real autonomy, right, the way we want it to be functional in prod, I recommend run the agents alongside with the existing human process, right? Now you're not comparing agent versus agent, you're comparing agent versus the real human process, right? So we are not trying to replace the human, but we are trying to see how both the things goes parallelly for a definite amount of period, right? So few organization need 30 days and quarter and whatever duration fits for you. But what is that we're going to achieve out of it is, you can measure accuracy, you can flag the divergence, you can study the failure cases, right? Often the shadow period will help you to evaluate the agent and see where the human intervention is required and where you can withdraw the human intervention. I think we need to make the shadow mode deployment as a mandatory event to achieve the human intervention, the percentage, whatever we're looking at. It's like a throttle, right? You can put it down, you can put it up, but to do that, you need to measure it through shadow mode deployment. So I just want to add that, Brian.
No, it makes perfect sense, because really what we're doing here is it's an optimization exercise, right? We're trying to get the best result possible. And when you shadow and have the parallel processes in place, you can see where the value is greater on the human process versus the AI process. And you can sharpen either and make them both better. So yeah, no, I love that answer. Keeping the spotlight on you, Preetham, and getting back to your compliance gold star here. The next question I had was, what does audit readiness look like for AI in your world? And like, what gets logged, what evidence you retain, and what would you want ready before an examiner even asks the question?
All right. So let me be honest about something first, Brian, right? So the most institutions are not fully audit ready for AI, right? You agree it or not, right? Not because they're not trying. I'm not saying the institutions are not trying, but because the audit playbook for a non-deterministic system simply hasn't been written in full, in comprehensive, right? So let's look at what the traditional audit assumes, right? Today, if any traditional audit assumes, you can reconstruct exactly what happened and why it happened, right? With AI agents, you can reconstruct what happened, but why gets complicated faster and faster, right? So what I'm recommending is not just an audit trail, right? Think about, we need to build a flight recorder, right? Because if something goes wrong, you need to be able to show an auditor exactly what the agent saw, what it decided, and what happened as a result, right? And you need to do it without taking help of another AI, right? You don't want another AI to give you the comments for audit, right? So that's what I'm heading to it. So a bit of a background for it, right? So in financial services, right, if you're faced any auditor or audits, Audits have always been about evidence of supervision and control, two things. How are you supervising? How are you controlling? If it might be FINRA, it might be SEC, or it might be our state regulators, they are not just asking, did the system work? All they're asking is, did you know it was working? And how did you know? The second question is where the AI creates an entirely new challenge. How did we know it's working, right? So here is something, the three layers of audit readiness, which we use and I recommend is, the first one is, what is getting logged for AI agents, right? The output alone is not sufficient, right? What you need to log is the full decision context. When I call about full decision context, it includes the input the agent received, right? The prompt or instructions that the agent is operating on, the model version which is active at that moment, and the data sources the model used to make a decision, and so on and so forth, till the output with the timestamp. But the most important thing is, in all these AI agents, you also need to log the human touch points. In your entire agentic workflow, where did the human intervene? And every instance the human intervened and reviewed, approved, or even override or escalated agent decision, that needs to be logged. This is very crucial for your audit trail, right? And secondly, what evidence do you need to retain, right? So I want us to think this in layers, right? The first layer, we definitely spoke about the logs, and absolutely when it comes to AI, the volume is really huge because we need to have the granularity of data stored in the logs. But the second layer is the model documentation itself. So we call it as a model biography. So you need to know that what model you're using, what data the model was trained on, what is the behavioral test you perform on that model, right? And who approved to go into the production. And think that you've changed the model between two client interactions. What were the results? All those documentations is a key for your audit trail, right? And the third layer is your leaving evidence, right? Think about, I think Trincy was calling out, like you deploy and and software enhancement, and you go on the production day, post deployment, evaluate, and store results. That's not enough for agentic AI, right? We need to have an ongoing monitoring results, right? Pre-deployment is not sufficient, right? We need continuous production monitoring that captures model drift, right? The output distribution shifts or any performance delegations over time as well. So with all these layers in place, and now think that four of us are sitting in front of auditors, right? And we are facing the audit. So what are the things which helps us? I think the three basic things, again, I'm going to put in place. The first one is have a clean inventory of your every AI system, right? Which is touching a regulated workflow, which includes the purpose of it, which includes inputs, output, your human oversight mechanisms, your model versions, all of that. Secondly, you need to have your change management process, which is a key for any audits, right? Basically version, how you're validating, how you're approving, how you're deploying the model updates, all of that sort, right? And the third, it's very important for us to capture is escalations, right? You deployed it, there was an escalation or there was an incident. How did you capture that, right? What happened when that agent failed or behaved unexpectedly? What triggered the human review and how it was resolved? So all of this it's kind of key. So for me, the audit readiness for AI comes down to one simple principle: build the evidence trail at architecture time, right? It's more of the technology side I'm going towards, right? Not at the examination time. I've just given an example in terms of flight recording. If I want to switch the contest bit there, right? The flight recorder has to be running before the flight. We all agree that, right?
Yeah.
It need not to be assembled after the incident. So that's the key for your audit readiness, right? Back to you.
Krystyna, anything to add?
Yeah, very, very much resonates with me for monitoring and change management, because monitoring, we always, sometimes some companies, they have special teams for monitoring, and that has nothing to do with actual development. So those are two organizations might not be in sync, and not regularly supplying, latest updates to each other. And then for change management, how we often let's say like it's something urgent right now on production, and teams are really rushing to address this. And sometimes there's many steps that might be missed, not properly documented, because what is priority? Priority to resolve it and deliver to the customer. And then, like sometimes we can figure out something later, like in terms of how do we then processes internally, but it's really important. And when the good change management in place, then it's a standard for future changes and for future enhancements. So it's like a golden standard we develop early at the architecture level, so we can continue building this legacy then for audit to have it ready whenever we're ready.
No. And Trincy, anything to add?
No, they covered it all. I mean, same. I completely are on the same page with Preetham. Like you have to have the flight recorder before the flight. So yeah, show them what you tested, how you tested, what decisions were made. Like have that audit trail from the get-go, not after something goes wrong. So yeah.
I'm gonna pose the next one to you, Trincy, and it gets a little bit repetitive, but I think the messaging is good to hear. And this is around agents starting to execute tasks and not just recommend suggestions. What is the bar, at least in your organization, for releasing an agent that can act on its own? And is that bar determined by the trust and the risk appetite, or by what you can actually test and prove? I think we already heard the answer a couple of times. I'd love to hear it again.
yeah, I think maybe we're repeating, but the bar isn't whether we trust the agent. It's whether we can contain the consequences when it's wrong. So you should be able to, I mean, in the old world also, we used to say we should be able to fail fast, recover faster. So I see an autonomy as a risk to your release decision. Like for low risk, reversible actions, the agent can act automatically with a monitoring or an audit trail. For higher impact actions, we add limits, approvals, human review, and for irreversible or safety critical actions, we may not want that autonomy at all. Just a strong recommendation for human to act on would be necessary in that case. So I think to earn that autonomy, we need three things. First, can you actually test it? We need that representative evaluations, adversarial testing, failure mode analysis. And if you can't measure it reliably, you can't release it autonomously. That's non-negotiable. Second, does that match your risk appetite? Testing might show 95% accuracy, but 95% means 1 in 20 decisions were wrong. And for low-cost actions or reversible actions, and that's probably acceptable. But for compliance or safety critical decisions, that's not. You can't fail. So the third one is, can you defend it? Can you show the test results, the rubric, the data, your thresholds, or how you're monitoring this in production? Can you reproduce the conditions of a past decision if you need to investigate it later? Can you roll back if needed? Can you have a kill switch? If you can answer all those things, yes, we have tested. The risk matches the appetite. We can defend our choices and you can release. And if anyone says in this three things, it's a maybe, I'm not sure, then you shouldn't. We don't need to prove that the agent is perfect. We just need to say its behavior is contained, failures can be detected, recovery is possible, and we know how to pivot. Trust is the outcome of that evidence. It's not a substitute for it.
And on the favorable outcomes, the juice is worth the squeeze, right? Because risk appetite is different and very different from person to person, right? And you put it into great terms. And you said 95% correct is still wrong 1 out of 20 times, right? And you wear glasses, I wear glasses. You went for LASIK surgery and they told you 1 out of 20 it doesn't work, you probably wouldn't move forward, right? However, someday. So, Preetham or Krystyna, anything to add?
I think, yeah. So I just want to add a couple of points, Brian, right?
Please.
So the operational space is where the trust is aligned, as I called out. But think about your AI solution need not to be involved in the transaction, as I called out in my, the first question response, right? So one of the topic which we never talk enough is the agentic solution today are just not within the financial workflows, right? They're acting within your engineering teams, right? That build these financial platforms. So in all our industries and even in all our companies, our tech and product teams are using the same agents today, right? That accelerates software delivery, that reduces application downtime, right? And ship advisor capabilities much faster, right? It might be code review, test generation, intelligent incident, or AI in the entire PDLC, right? Now the organization are coming with the concept of AI in product development's lifecycle, starting from research till the deployment, right? So this is really a compounding effect. The compounding effect is real, and your customers can see that results upfront. I think that's another area where it's not spoken a lot, but we were thinking only in the financial side. But the AI within the engineering teams, the impact is huge.
Noted.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Yeah, I'm agree on that. I have nothing to add. It's just, yeah, this is how it is. Yes.
So that brings us to our last question. And like I said, you guys have been great and so accommodating as we jump from topic to topic, so you can get as broad a broad purview as possible. But the last one is more of a soft question, right? Which is, as we go through this, we're all learning things every day. And is there anything that you can share with us that you've learned that you're now adopted as best practice within your organization? And then conversely, is there anything you've learned that you should absolutely not ever do again? And that's open to everybody, but Preetham, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, sure. I think the best practice which I learned the hard way is, so build the constraint spec first before you build your capability spec. That's the best practice I've been advocating, and I could advocate even here, right? So what does that mean is define what the agent cannot do before you define what it can do. It's pretty important, right? So what does that mean is you define what this agent is never allowed to do, what decision it must always escalate to a human, and what guardrails are non-negotiable, regardless of how confident the model appears for you, right? That's the key. So build your constraint spec first before you build your capability spec, right? And I want to combine this with, I've been calling out as well, combine this with your parallel testing, right? So deploy it, have human doing the same work, have your agent doing the same work. It's very key, right? The duration is up to you, but the shadow support is a key. It definitely provides you a lot of benefits on flag divergence. You can study the failure cases in detail. So don't always treat it as an launch event for your AI agents. Keep a period where you have a shadow support, right? That's what the best practices kind of have learned, Brian. And I can say the never do's as well, right? Which we learned. But for the best practices, I'll just pause there.
We'll keep the negative in case we have extra time. Trincy, how about you? What are the most valuable lessons learned, and what have you adopted as now best practice?
I think you're on mute.
You're either on mute or we lost your mic.
No, I was on mute. Thank you. I fell many times before I stood, or even if I don't know if I'm standing properly now too. But yeah, one thing was the negative ones. That's definitely one. You focus on what we should be doing, and then you miss what else it can do, and that was creating a set of problems. So yes, definitely define that. In my early days, I just did not know how to come up with all these things. There probably were industry terms for it. I just did not know what it was called. You would try to get a pass or fail, like how we were used to. And I would run an agent. I don't see the result. I would run the same agent on the same criteria multiple times and try to see which one had the most common answer, and maybe end up doing majority voting to say this is a pass. So sometimes it worked, but when in certain products and certain scenarios, that was not at all reliable. So figuring out what else to do. I mean, it was a organic growth where we did not know it was called confidence score, but we started building a confidence score around it. And then we learned low confidence doesn't mean it's wrong. It's something you can neglect. So again, I fell there. So, just something which was prioritized as a low bug or a low problem ended up being a relevant one. So coming up with that proper score, for me, I'm still going back to rubric, defining those criteria, defining positive, negative. So I approached it like a manual tester would approach maybe front-end testing. And using AI as what's my positive scenarios or what's my negative scenarios if performance is needed. For all that cases, define all that upfront and then go with it. Not just do trial and error. You're going to waste time and tokens. So I'm still learning. A lot of times I'm still falling and then standing up, continuing this.
Well, I'm going to go to Krystyna next on the same question, but you bring up another question that could be an entire panel, which is conserving and token optimization, right? Because we can there is this action bias for AI, right? It wants to please you and it wants to give you an answer, and it doesn't care how many times it has to ping it, right? So, but anyways, that's a whole nother day. But Krystyna, please, if you could share some best practices, that'd be great too.
Sure. To close that topic, I think there are already agents that are learning and training on how to save tokens on another agents. So I know they exist. But to close this topic on best practices, I guess I'll complete the loop with what not to do. That's not to train agents on a clean, perfect data. So I know we are in financial services. We're in high regulated domain. There's everything is clean and steady and perfect, but there's always human error, and there's always customers who are entering data to all applications. And there's some people entering uppercase, some lowercase, 3 spaces. There's always something new that you think already you saw everything, but customers surprising always. So, and I think because we trained on a perfect data, then we are having a really hard time to identify those slips where the actual problems arise. And let's say uppercase, it doesn't mean that customer entered wrong information. It just didn't align with the practices that were, passed to our AI agent. So my advice going forward, we are having as many problems as we get in a data, get it so diverse and imperfect, not clean at all. And then we train our agent to identify where exactly the issues are. And there's so many variations of still good data that can be utilized.
Yeah, if you do everything in a pristine laboratory, you're never going to know, how it works and the pristine conditions aren't there. That's great advice. We only have about a minute left, and there was a handful of questions that came through, but this happened in the last session that I hosted or I moderated yesterday, which is a question came up about talent and around what are the critical skills that we need to develop within the engineering community that are going to serve us well for the next 5 to 10 years because things have happened so quickly or things are happening so rapidly. So this is a quick round robin, 30 seconds apiece. What are those skills for the next 5, 10 years within AI? Trincy, I'll put you on the spot first.
I'm not sure what are the skills for the next. So basically, you should be open for change. Things are changing very quickly. There was a time I thought in few months, there were people who did not know anything about AI, ended up being experts than how I was. And if you just slow down, there's a lot of things happening a lot quickly around you. So be open to what's changing, and maybe sample that also to see if it is something you should be using, you should be adopting, and move forward. For me, I don't have an oversight how it's changing. I probably won't even recognize 5 years later how things are going to be. But for me, that each time I would go learn something, listen to somebody else, you get 1 point out of it or a few points out of it, and then try it on your side and see where else can I adopt it. I went to a conference recently, and we were using 2 models to make a decision. They were using 16 models to make a decision. So, it again comes down to cost, what is practical for you. But they had a more reliable answer, and they said, it could be $10 for me to do this, but they never go back. They save a lot of cost around it. So there are many things you learn by just being observant of the industry, how it's evolving, and I would say keep up with it.
Preetham?
All right, like 30, 29, 28. So I'm gonna put this one level up, right, Brian? So I feel the capabilities which you're bringing and how the tech is evolving, I believe and I foresee that the tech, product, and operations going to combine at some point in time, right?
Oh.
So the way you see today, you have tech different, product different, and operations. But I feel that the skill sets, which you need to be enabling yourself is, if you're tech, make sure you have a skill set on both operational and product. If you're from product, the other two. If operations, the other two. That's very crucial to have all 3 together. I think that will be, the convergence which is going to happen very soon.
Yeah, that convergence to the SME, right, to the end user is so critical, where this used to really live in development environment and engineering, 100%. And then Krystyna?
Yeah, I would agree with Preetham, but I wanted to expect from within the quality assurance as well. So let's say you need to become a chef on your own kitchen. So if we imagine the restaurant and how the kitchen operates, we have pastry chef, we call it sauce chef, we have meat chef, we have every area as a designated person. But today, with everything evolving, instead of this specialty chefs, you have AI agents, and you have to become a master chef and operate in your own kitchen and be. It means you need to understand infrastructure, understand architecture, know what trigger you should trigger to make it work. So be more, expand on the skills, even if you're you're in a specialty like quality or only performance or anywhere. Just need to expand to be able, you can actually step in and be a chef, master chef.
I love that analogy, be a chef in your own kitchen. I will end with just adding a quick anecdote of my own. The other thing is, you can teach old dogs new tricks. I am the oldest person here, I think, by quite a bit, and I am proof. I couldn't spell AI 2 years ago, and now I work at an AI organization. So I really appreciate it. This has been great and a lot of fun for the past hour, and I'm sure all the attendees enjoyed it too. So thank you each for your participation and making TestMU conference as rich as it has been for its heritage. So thank you so much, and have a great rest of the week and weekend, okay?
Thank you, Brian. Thanks,
Thank you all. Okay.